welcome to this basics episode on North Eastern Railway number 1275, the oldest surviving long boiler locomotive in Britain, and a rare survivor from the Stockton and Darlington Railway. Number 1275 was built in 1874 by Dubs and Company of Glasgow. She was designed by William Bouch as part of his 1001 class, of which 192 examples were built between 1852 and 1875. Bouch was born in Cumbria in 1813 and was apprenticed to Robert Stephenson and Company, Newcastle upon Tyne. His younger brother, Sir Thomas Bouch, was a civil engineer and the designer of the ill-fated Tay Bridge, which collapsed during a gale on the 28th of December 1879 with the loss of 75 lives. After completing his apprenticeship with Stephenson and Company, William Bouch became chief engineer of the Butterley Iron Works and in 1837 visited Russia. From 1840 he was locomotive superintendent of the Stockton and Darlington Railway and took charge at the Shildon Works. The Stockton and Darlington Railway had been opened in 1825 primarily as a mineral line to carry coal from mines around Bishop Auckland in County Durham via Shildon and Darlington to the River Tees at Stockton and later to a new port at Middlesbrough. It was operated using a mix of motive power, locomotives, stationary engines and horses. Whilst the line did carry passengers, from 1825 to 1833 this service was leased to individual stagecoach proprietors and was entirely horse-worked. The Stockton and Darlington Railway merged with the North Eastern Railway in 1863, but maintained a quasi-independent existence until the end of 1875. Upon his appointment to the Stockton and Darlington Railway, Bouch was responsible for modernising the line's fleet of locomotives, introducing several designs based on Robert Stephenson's patent long boiler locomotive. Bouch is also credited with, in 1860, introducing the American type or 440 locomotive into Britain for service on the Stockton and Darlington Railway. Although Robert Stephenson and Company had built the first 440s in 1859, these locomotives were destined for export to the Ottoman Empire rather than for use at home. Bouch took one of these Stephenson 440s on trial and was so impressed by its performance he immediately placed an order for 2 more from Stephenson's. He then obtained permission from the Stockton and Darlington to build 6 at his own works at Shildon. The first, number 160, or Bruffham, was delivered in the August of 1860, and unlike most British locomotives at the time, Bouch's locomotives had full cabs in American style. But to get back to 1275, Bouch introduced his long boiler 1001 class in 1852, and they were used on heavy mineral trains, particularly over the steeply graded Stainmore route and on the Whitby branch, for which duty they were fitted with extended cabs. Originally known as the Hippopotamus class, the class was long-lived, with the design being produced with few modifications until 1875. Number 1275 was part of the penultimate batch of the 1001 class to be delivered. She was ordered in May 1873 from Dubs and Company as works number 707 and was delivered in the May of 1874. Her driving wheels are just shy of 5 feet in diameter and the inside cylinders measure 17 by 26 inches. She uses Stephenson link valve gear and has a maximum boiler pressure of 130 psi. She weighs 35 tons. 1275 was originally fitted with 2 sets of buffing gear to enable her to operate with traditional chaldron wagons and with more modern mineral rolling stock. Whilst Bouch may have modernised the Stockton and Darlington Railway's fleet of locomotives, when the old S&D became part of the North Eastern Railway in 1863, its locomotives were a somewhat heterogeneous group. So, in August 1883, in an attempt to bring her and her sisters into North Eastern Railway Group Standard, number 1275 was fitted with a new, larger boiler by the North Eastern's newly appointed locomotive superintendent, Alexander MacDonnell. Alexander MacDonnell, however, didn't last very long as locomotive superintendent, as he was dismissed in 1884 to be replaced by the Quaker engineer Thomas William Worsdale, and he continued the trend of standardisation. In turn, Thomas William was succeeded by his brother Wilson Worsdale as a locomotive superintendent in 1890. Both Worsdales had experience of American locomotives, having worked at the Altoona works of the Pennsylvania Railroad. As a result, Wilson Worsdale developed a quote-unquote big engine policy. So, in 1896, number 1275 received a third, even bigger boiler. This one was to last only a little longer than the McDonnell boiler, as she was reboilered in 1906 using a second-hand Worsdale boiler, and it is this boiler which the locomotive still carries. In later years, number 1275 was based at Moulton to work trains to Whitby, on what is now the North Yorkshire Moors Railway. In 1923, the North Eastern Railway became part of the new London and North Eastern Railway, and number 1275 was taken into LNER ownership, having accrued an official mileage of 908,984 miles. She was the last 1001 class member in service and was withdrawn on the 16th of February 1923 after a working life of 49 years. Thereafter she was stored, but was restored in 1925 for the Stockton and Darlington centenary celebrations, the restoration attempting to bring her back to her as-built 1874 condition. Still wearing her North Eastern Railway livery, she became part of the LNER's Railway Museum at York, and is now part of the National Collection, proudly on display in the Great Hall at the National Railway Museum in York. So those have been the basics on number 1275, a proud survivor of not only the Stockton and Darlington Railway, but the North Eastern Railway, and the last of William Bouch's 192-strong 1001 class. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you have done, please leave a comment below, and please also like, share and subscribe. If you would like early access to Rail Story content, you can support Rail Story on Patreon for as little as a takeaway cup of coffee once per month. And see you all next time on Rail Story.